back to the Irish Mags Show, episode 44, brought to you by the Irish Mags NUFC Supporters Group. I'm Paul. This week, I'm joined by Alan. Hello, Alan.
Hello, how are you?
Alan, look, we're going to have to address the elephant in the room, or maybe the elephant who's not in the room.
Not in the room, yeah.
There's rumours going around that you fired Krisho. Is this true? What's happened? Where is he? Does anyone know where Krisho is?
I tried to fire him, but what he did was he ran off to Croatia. He keeps sending me pictures of lovely coastlines and stuff like that, and I'm not getting jealous at all. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so as the host of this podcast, Alan, and the guy who does all the hard work, how much is Krisho getting paid for his podcast appearances? Because it's clearly more than me.
You see, what we're doing here is we're paying for him to go away because he was driving us mad. So that's what we did. Yeah, okay. See, we thought about it logically. That's what the community fund's being used for, to get rid of Krisho.
I was just going to say, that's the Irish Mags Community Fund being used to very good effect. So thank you for everyone who's contributed. It's all going to a good place. It means you don't have to listen to Krisho for yet another week. But we do hope he'll be back next week if he decides to actually return from Croatia, a big if. Right, well, on this week's show, myself and Alan are going to have, as quick as possible, a chat about that Fulham game last weekend to kind of set the scene for the weekend that's ahead. Obviously didn't go according to plan. We should have been talking about a Carabao Cup game/win over at Wimbledon, but as we all know, that's been moved. But we might just touch on the draw that happened in that Carabao Cup and who we are likely to face in the next round, assuming we do win. For our spotlight, we're going to have a little chat about our favourite and best Newcastle United games of the Premier League era. We've picked out a few. We weren't at them all. We've been at some of them between us. And we might, if we get along this week, we might actually try and rank them together, Alan, if we can actually agree on these kind of things. Because, again, Krisho isn't here, so it should be nice and peaceful without him. We're then going to turn our attention to the weekend and what could be pitched as our biggest game of the season so far, as we welcome Manchester City to St. James's Park. And not only that, Alan, I think I'm going to see you in person this weekend because we're both going.
There's a potential we could both make it to the match together for the first time.
Can you imagine? I mean, we should, seeing as it's on at 12:30 in the morning, so like there should be no excuse to be drunk by 12:30. Although I know a few of you lads are on a very early morning flight from Dublin.
That 5:45 flight in the morning on Saturday morning does not lead to not being drunk at 12 o'clock in the day. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah, and we have business to attend to as well on the day that we're going to touch on, some Irish Mags official business, assuming all goes to plan. I just couldn't face travelling up from Galway at stupid o'clock in the morning, so I'm flying on Friday because it just was like, no, I'm not doing it. Couldn't bring myself to it. So,
and you slag
I'll have to watch myself. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll have to borrow some money from Krisho. And then before we wrap up, we will have a chat, obviously, about the Irish Mags on tour. I think we've got a good old gang travelling for this game as well. So hopefully we'll have some flags and Irish Mags merch in attendance. And there's some big news in the meetups front as well. There's a lot happening this weekend, Irish Mags. So you better stay tuned for the next 45 minutes while we go through all of it. Alan, let's get it out of the way. Fulham 3, Newcastle United 1. Depression, misery, poor performance, all of the above. Give us your thoughts on what transpired last Saturday.
3-1 flattered us. It should have been 7-8-1. Absolutely pathetic. We were brutal. Let's be honest about it. There's no point saying, "Oh, we were unlucky." We were brutal. 15 minutes in the second half where we looked like we were coming back to life. We didn't lay a glove on them. Adama Traore looked like he was Messi reincarnated. We couldn't get near the man. Man usually has no end product. I think he got an assist in the first 3 minutes, and I'm going, this is the end of that one. Sloppy mistakes for the goals. Something is not right in that squad. Can't put my finger on it because if I could, I'd be a Premier League manager, but there's something not right in that squad. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah, a lot of the narrative I'm kind of picking up on. I mean, yes, there was mistakes, right? I literally watched that game and went, well, they scored 3 goals from 3 individual mistakes. But equally, we played terribly for the majority of the game. So even though, sometimes you're like, oh, well, we didn't do too bad, but we just had some silly mistakes. They just kind of were the theme of the day, really. It just summed it up, I guess. But the narrative I've been picking up this week has largely been this kind of concept that Eddie Howe still is struggling to kind of nail down his kind of first 11, his best 11. And even in game, like getting that mix of who starts and who comes on, the fullback kind of exchanges that have just been happening, week on week. It's just all a little bit messy. And I'm trying to get my head around, does he really just not know? Or is it just like, there's a lot changing, like even though we haven't brought in loads of new players, There's still a lot of movement. There's like players who are back from injury that weren't there last season. And when you have almost a full squad to choose from, bar like obviously Sven Botman, Callum Wilson, and Jamal Lascelles, is it just a case of, well, it's not a new squad, but there's a lot going on that we just didn't have to deal with last season, and it's taking time because we're only 5 games in.
Well, if you look at the last 2 Premier League games, we've made 5 substitutions at halftime in 2 games. If that doesn't scream, I've gotten my selection wrong, nothing will. As I'm sick, blue in the face saying in the group chat, play your best team is great and all that jazz. Best team on paper and best team at the moment are 2 very different things.
True.
He tried to play Joe Willock against Fulham, and the midfield got absolutely ran through. Willock, Joe Linton, Bruno were the 3 worst players on the pitch. Maybe Dan Burn can go into that category, but he didn't get a whole heap of cover, so I'm giving him the benefit of having 1 bad game.
Yeah.
We're all screaming out for Tonali to play a game. We're all screaming. As much as I hate to say it, Sean Longstaff needs to come back into that midfield until we sort it out.
Wow. Do you know, I wasn't sure when I'd hear that first, even though it's only really been 1 game. Like, the outcries and the outpours of desire for Sean Longstaff to not start. Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me. I think the industrial manner of how he plays and what he gives us at times can be very effective, and it probably would have been more effective against Fulham.
Yeah, I've said it for the last couple of weeks. Sean Longstaff is playing at Sean Longstaff levels, which is perfectly fine for him because he's not a bad footballer. He's limited. We know what he's limited at. But Joe Linton and Bruno are playing below Sean Longstaff levels and seems to be getting away with it. Now, Bruno he starts slowly usually and gets into himself. Joe Linton, I don't know what the story is there. He has been terrible this season, and obviously we want him to get back to his best. But sometimes you need to just drop the man to give him the boot up the hole to go, come on, you need to sort yourself out. I don't know what it is. I don't know how they're going to fix it. Eddie Howe has another week on the training ground with them. Something seriously needs to change, though. And my eyes, it has to be Tonali, Longstaff, and Bruno that start in that midfield on Saturday. If we get it, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, I mean, the midfield isn't clicking, but we made Fulham look very good. We made Adama Traore look unbelievable on the wing. Emile Smith-Rowe was a player we were linked with in the past. Apparently, Eddie Howe was a big fan. You can see why. I'd say Arsenal are actually regretting letting him go, seeing as they're now missing Martin Odegaard. But pity for them. It's their own fault. But, we not only didn't play well, we actually made kind of a mid-table side. They're a solid side, but we actually made them look a lot better. Raul Jimenez, like, we couldn't get near him, especially for that first goal. And, he's a Premier League striker, but you'd argue he should, or is, kind of almost over his peak or his prime. And, we made him look like a really good number 9. It's almost like everybody is 20%, 30% off it collectively. I was doing an instant reaction last week with True Faith, and one of the questions you always get is who was Newcastle's man of the match. Hardest question I ever had to answer for that game, because nobody played well. Like, sometimes you might say Nick Pope kept us in it here and there, or nobody played well.
On Nick Pope, what the hell was that second goal? Have you seen that in a schoolboy game at under 8s or under 9s, you turn around to the goalkeeper and like, you're going to go play centre half next week? That was beyond. Look, everyone can make a mistake and that's okay, but that was an incredibly bad mistake for a keeper of his standard to make. And what's this thing of him now trying to shovel everything that instead of catching it, he shovels it around and around the post? It's driving me mad. Either catch the ball, punch the ball, get it clear, put it out for a corner. It caused a goal against Spurs. It could have caused 2 or 3 goals against Fulham. We're playing Man City this Saturday. Arguably the second best team on planet Earth at the minute behind that Real Madrid side. If he starts doing that shoveling shite, we're going to lose 5-0. We won't have a chance. Get the ball, put it out for a corner. I don't care where it goes as long as it's not in the back of the net or straight to a Man City player. But I just do not understand this shovel and save technique that he's picked up. Confidence clearly isn't there. Yeah, confidence just clearly isn't there.
I like him because he's getting grief about his kicking and distribution, all that kind of stuff. But where he usually wins everyone back is shot stopping and like handling of the ball. And that was a bit shaky against Fulham, all right. But again, I think he's not like that was one mistake. But I think there was a lot of other players. Trippier got caught out for that same goal. For some reason, he kept tucking in and then just leaving. I think it was Alex Iwobi on the left and acres of space. And again, which just made Fulham look way too good. And I think we've talked about it. We got caught out finally against Fulham because we've been having good results. Look, we're still sitting in a very good place in the table because we've got a few wins. But Fulham were the team that caught us out. And I kind of feared it. Marco Silva's a very good manager. Now we're coming up against the best manager of his generation this weekend, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, I guess Eddie Howe, like we're going to need either fresh ideas, new ideas, or everybody in the squad needs to go and come in with 20-30% more intensity, aggression, and fire in the belly. Otherwise, it could be a tough day on Saturday.
Absolutely. But the other thing is, could that loss be the best thing that happens to us? That it finally kicks them out of we're bumbling our way to winning the league, kind of joking and laughing, where they go, okay, we've now lost, we're playing terrible, we need to sort this out. Where the whole squad looks at themselves and go, we need to fix this. Like you could see Bruno's instant reaction on Twitter where he's apologized the next one and said, I don't want an apology. I want the performance next week. I don't care what you do during the week. Get a performance next week and prove to me that you actually care. So hopefully that's what we get this week. It's a performance. That's all we want.
Hopefully, indeed. And we're going to come to that a little bit later in the show when we talk about Manchester City and all that's going to go with it, especially what do we think Eddie Howe needs to do with the squad and the starting 11 and all those lovely, lovely things. But before we get to that, let's take a little trip down memory lane, Alan. You and me love a bit of nostalgia. Chriso doesn't really have as much nostalgia because he kind of just can't really remember the past. But we wanted to have a chat about a few kind of particular games over the last 20, 30 years that we're going to hopefully, peacefully and simultaneously agree on a kind of a top 5 ranking. So between the two of us, we've picked out quite a few, and we'll ask the listeners, throw your own suggestions in the YouTube comments if you're watching on YouTube, looking at our beautiful faces and not Chriso's beautiful face, to let us know which games you think actually stand out in memory, and if any of you were at the games we're going to talk about. I suppose we kind of just go back, Alan. We probably have to start with the 90s and the entertainers era, and probably the first game that you and I both put on the list was that famous Newcastle United 5, Manchester United 0. Now, again, for those of you watching on YouTube, over my right shoulder here, I have one of the, basically the Clive Tilsley commentary sheets on the wall here framed beside me. Bit hard to see now to zoom in on it. But I'm going to throw you some of the names, Alan, like David Ginola was on the first 11, Alan Shearer, Les Ferdinand, Peter Beardsley, Philippe Albert, Darren Peacock, Cernacek in goals, like David Batty, Rob Lee. This was the golden generation of that Newcastle era. And we went out and absolutely spanked, arguably, the best team of that era as well. Looking at all the league titles that Manchester United won. We should have won one, if not two, in that time as well. Never mind those FA Cups. But memories of that game, Alan? You were a small, innocent young lad running around the streets of Dublin. Do you remember watching that? Do you remember where you were?
I was 3 years old.
Right, I'm gonna take this one, folks, because I'm clearly a lot older than Alan with my big head of grey hair and his fresh trim on screen. So I'll go back. I remember watching it at home, and long-term listeners of this podcast may remember, Alan, because we always remind them that I was brought up in a Manchester United household, and obviously, so I started supporting Newcastle. I'm going to say it was around 94, 95-ish kind of era. Pretty sure it was the season Blackburn actually won the league. It was tough growing up in that house because every year I was watching Man United just beat Newcastle, just kind of religiously. And even though we were, obviously starting to create a bit of a rivalry there, and it was an excellent manager rivalry between Keegan and Ferguson as well. I remember, now, I want to say I was probably 9, if not 10, maybe 10, when this game was played versus you're 3 years old. And I remember, I think it's the first time I ever gloated and strutted around my own house. I might as well have put on a pair of sunglasses and just kind of had just a walk around because I was just buzzing. I celebrated every goal like it was the best and first goal I'd ever seen. And when Philippe Albert chipped that ball over Peter Schmeichel, it was just the icing on the cake for 10-year-old me. And I never let them live it down for the weeks that followed. With my brother, my parents, all Manchester United fans, and God, that was satisfying. Absolutely. What are your, like? Obviously not your memories, but like having you've watched those goals back.
I've watched that match a couple of times now at this stage. Like it is one of our most famous games in our history. Let's be very honest about it. But it's just it was a game where absolutely everything clicked for us. And as you said, the Albert lob was the cherry on top of the cake, on top of the icing, if you know what I mean. It was just, didn't need to be done, but he did it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it was just beautiful to see.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, they're completely different, right? But like Fabian Schär is our current
Yeah.
version of Philippe Albert, but scores much better and more frequent banging goals. But it's just, that kind of European centre back, not elite tier, obviously not English, but like Philippe Albert was Belgian, Schär is Swiss. There's just remnants there. It's a nice kind of a narrative. It's a nice poetic thing. Okay, now I did throw another game in here, which some listeners may not actually kind of think about straight away. Just while we were talking about beating Manchester United, I was at a game in Old Trafford in the Manchester United season ticket holder section with my dad and my mother and my brother, all Man United fans. I had a Newcastle jacket on, or a Newcastle jersey on under my jacket because you weren't allowed to see it. And Johan Gabay scored to give us a 1-0 win in Old Trafford. So I just had to throw it in there because that's one of the favourite games I was ever at, and it wasn't even in St James's Park, which is a weird one for me because of how much I love St James's Park. It may not make our ranking, but I just wanted to give it honourable mention. And shout out to Johan Gabay for that goal as well. Okay. Let's go to another game of a kind of similar era, maybe, or that time, maybe a little bit later, was that win over Barcelona in the Champions League. I can't remember exactly what year it was.
I think it was 98.
98, 99 kind of season.
Yeah.
Probably 98. And, I mean, there's only two words you can really say, Alan. Faustino Asprilla.
Asprilla. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Another one that I'll be very honest, I don't actually remember because I was 5 when that game happened. So I'll hold my hands up. I'm running off this off of highlights, but Barcelona were they were the pinnacle of European football at this stage. They came to St James's Park and didn't know what hit them. Remnants of a game from a couple of years back when a certain team from Paris came to St James's Park and didn't know what was going on, but absolutely sensational. Asprilla ran arguably one of the best defenses on planet Earth at the time, ragged. Got himself a hat-trick and it's just unbelievable. Just one of them games. The cartwheel celebration at the end, you're just going, it's just iconic for Newcastle.
Well, he had to do it a few times, the poor fella. I mean, he's so iconic for Newcastle fans. He's so iconic of that era. He didn't score a load of you might think he scored more than he did, kind of. But when he banged, by God, did he bang! It was just iconic. The celebration, the style of play, the way he ran, just everything. The jersey being way too big for him, the long sleeves, the whole lot. Now, just a reminder for listeners who might not be aware. This is a Barcelona side who, at the time, had Rivaldo, Figo, Nadal, Luis Enrique, Sergi, who was a really good left back, Michael Reisiger, right back, Dutch international, Ivan de la Pena. They had Louis van Gaal managing them. And we smashed. We arguably smashed them, because they scored. I think they scored a couple of late goals.
They scored 2 in the last 10 minutes or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and they even brought on Christophe Dugarry, who just casually a French World Cup winner, just to have on as a sub, as you do. Meanwhile, we brought on Darren Peacock and Timur Ketsbaya, so there's that. What a game! Listeners of a particular generation will remember that. Obviously, you're a little bit on the younger side, Alan. I do remember it though, and that was my first real taste of success in Europe as a Newcastle fan. Bearing in mind I had to watch all the Manchester United nonsense when they went and won it in 1999 because of the family issues. But it's a wonder I still talk to my family, really. Unbelievable game. Unbelievable. Okay. I'm going to let you choose the next one, Alan. Hit us with another suggestion for our ranking of all-time Newcastle United games.
I'm going to move it slightly into the more common era, and it's the Newcastle Arsenal 4-4 draw. Check Tiote. Banging that in the last minute. This holds a special place in my heart because my family are actually Arsenal. Well, my family, I say, my brother and stepdad are Arsenal fans. So that was a nice one. Being 4-0 down and getting absolute pelters off my whole family sitting there going, yeah, great. This is another day where Arsenal are going to go out and beat a 7-1 or something at home. And then we played Brazil 0-2 in the second half. It was mental. Now, helped by a soft red card for a certain Abu Dhabi in the midfield. But come here. You can only do what you can do. And we went out and we beat them 4-0 in the second half. And that's the easiest way to look at it. Finished off by Czech Tiote's only goal. Well, he did score against Man City and it was chalked off ridiculously. But Czech Tiote's only goal for Newcastle United being a 35-yard banger of a volley into the bottom corner in the last minute. Just doesn't get any better than that. And my favourite thing about that whole goal, Steve Harper runs from his box to the halfway line to celebrate, and for some reason drops a people's elbow on Czech Tiote. If you watch back at that celebration, just drops a random people's elbow onto him. So it's brilliant. What a game. Unbelievable.
It's probably the most Steve Harper ever had to run between the amount of appearances he made
Yeah.
and obviously playing as a goalkeeper. And yeah, I do like. I mean, there is 2 penalty goals from Joey Barton. You know, take from that what you will, but it's just all about the Czech Toyota goal. It's all about the equaliser, the celebration. I went fucking mental when he scored that goal.
100%.
I was above in the armchair the whole lot, and as comebacks go, like it's you know, it's rare that you talk about best games or favorite games ever, that we're putting in one where we didn't even win the game, but you just said it, we won the second half 4-0, and it's hard to remember a comeback as good as that in the entire history of the Premier League. And I think it's just made even more special by the fact, obviously, sadly, Czech Tiote passed away there a few years ago. And for him to be remembered by Newcastle fans for that goal is just, it's iconic.
Unbelievable.
He was unbelievable midfielder. The 6 we could do it now, but just that goal is it's just even more special for that fact. Good shout. Okay, it'll be hard not to get that one into the ranking, won't it? I wanted to touch on a game I also remember watching. Now, again, I'm terrible for the years. I'm actually going to Google it as we speak, because I remember watching this game live. 96-97 season. Newcastle were playing Leicester City. This would have been Martin O'Neill's iconic Leicester City of the 90s, where you had like Emile Heskey and Muzzy Izzet and all these guys featuring them. We were, similarly enough, we were losing. I'm just looking at the timing of the goals here. We were 3-1 down after 68 minutes when Emile Heskey actually scored. So we were 3-1 down at home. Enter Alan Shearer. And I genuinely watched this game live. Shearer brings it back to 3-2 on 77 minutes. 5 minutes later, levels the game on 83. And and this is a world now where we didn't have 45 minutes of injury time added on for all the stoppages and all that. In the 90th minute, or in one of the last kicks of the game, Shearer bangs 4-3, another comeback, and we beat Leicester. And again, some people might jump to this game in terms of, you know, it being one of the more iconic or favourite or best fixtures that we have ever played. But just, again, for me, because I remember watching it as a kid live, probably about 11. And I'll repeat the line I said earlier. I went fucking mental when Shearer scored that winning goal. And it's one of my favourite memories as a young Newcastle United fan. And those kind of things stick with you, right? Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
Remember that game?
No, I was 3 years old again. Yeah.
We really need Crisho for these ones. He's closer to my generation, isn't he? I'm sure a lot of the listeners who are a little bit older than Alan do remember, but you've obviously seen, you probably
I've seen
that hat trick, like a really good hat trick as well. And yeah, I don't know if it'll make it into our top 5 ranking, but again, just the euphoria of coming back from 3-1 down, unbelievable. And again, that's just emphatic. It was in St James's Park as well. The place absolutely erupted. Right. I'll let you give us another nomination there, Alan, from our list.
I'm going to go for the very easy one that I think could well be up there in first place, and it is our return to the Champions League at St James's Park, where we put Paris Saint-Germain to the sword and absolutely obliterated one of the best sides on planet Earth with all their superstars. And we ran out and ran them ragged, and Dan Burns scoring goals, Sean Longstaff scoring goals, Fabian Schär scoring absolute worldies, and Mickey Almiron opening up our Champions League account. It was literally like you asked someone, what's the funniest thing Newcastle could do tonight? And they wrote down all these things, and that's what we did. We went out and done it. It was the maddest game.
Do you know what it's really like? It's actually, if we were to rewind and if we were to do a preview of that game and Crisho was here, and I'd say, like, Crisho, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
Dan Burn will score, Sean Longstaff will score, Scher's going to score from 40 yards, and Almiron will get our first Champions League goal for 20 years or whatever. Like, that's how kind of mad, and it was almost like a dream. Like, I just couldn't believe what was unfolding in front of me. Like, I actually felt like a kid again because I was just the euphoria of it all. Yeah.
It was a joke.
It's like, again, there's remnants of that Barcelona game as well. It's like this generation's version of that. You know, we're connecting all the dots here, listeners.
That's it.
But obviously, everybody who's listening and watching this podcast will have watched that game. I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
We had a bunch of Irish mags who attended that game, and I don't know. I mean, it feels like a lot's happened since, and it feels almost like a long time ago. It's not that long, but I feel like if that, I always talk about this Livermento handball and the return leg, but we should have had 6 points against PSG and we should have advanced in that Champions League. And I think we'd look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just one game highlight of what ultimately was a shit group stage and an exit from the competition. And all of Europe, we didn't even get into the Europa after that. I think that's just one of the most mind-blowing things that to happen to me as an adult Newcastle fan. I just couldn't believe what I was watching. I'm sure everyone feels the same. Absolutely mad. Right, okay. Let's group two together. I'm going to throw two at you now, and they involve not one, but two teams from a place in England called Sheffield. Yes. And I thought these are worth mentioning, Alan, because, I mean, let's face facts. Newcastle 8, Sheffield Wednesday 0, and Newcastle 8, Sheffield United 0. They really don't like us in Sheffield anymore, for sure. We'll never be welcome there again. Look, I think the first one, the Sheffield Wednesday one, you were a little bit older, hopefully.
I was. I do actually remember this. I do remember this one.
It, folks.
Yes.
Okay.
It was Bobby Robson's first game as our manager.
Bobby Robson's first game in charge.
I always remember Shearer talking about this game after the fact, and he was like, Bobby, what do you want me to do? And he's like, score goals. That's what I want you to do. Stop doing anything other than put the ball in the net.
Stop coming back. Stop coming deep for the ball. Stop turning your back to goal. I remember it all, yeah.
5 goals, first game in. Another one where you're going, this is just written in the stars. It's a joke. It's this. We were sensational that day. And I think that was bottom against second bottom, or maybe third bottom. It was two bad sides playing against each other. Yeah. But we absolutely obliterated them, and just mental. And then the Sheffield United game, we watched this in the bleaker, and to this day, the funniest moment I've ever seen in the bleaker was when we scored the 8th goal with about 5 minutes to go, because Christian Martin had Newcastle to win 7-0, and he'd done it for the match. I'd never seen Newcastle score. A pub of Newcastle fans go, huh, oh wait, because he was going to win a nice amount of money, shall we say, but he had backed Newcastle to win 7-0. And we were like, you're an idiot. And we're 6-0 up, and we scored the 7. We're like, oh my God, right, stop playing football. Scored the 8 and ruined it on him. Funniest way to lose a 7-0 bet is your team winning 8-0, I think. Horrible.
I know, yeah. It's kind of like, you know, do you stay mad about it, or you're like, well, fuck it, we won 8-0, you know? Yeah. But yeah, you'd never expect to put a bet on a Premier League team to beat another one 7-0 and it actually come in. But again, that's something only the Chris Show could do, I'd say. Yeah. And I'd say he'd never be on this podcast again had he have won that bet as well. He probably would have moved to Croatia, you know. What you mentioned about the Sheffield Wednesday one, like, for me, it's so iconic because it really just set the tone of the Bobby Robson era, like the complete shift, the change in how things are going to be done. And it just kind of like, once it started, it was unstoppable. And obviously those few years with Bobby, a lot of our listeners probably, like, they might be their earliest memories of Newcastle. Maybe even yourself, Alan, as well.
It is.
And again, we were back in the Champions League under Bobby. We had, unbelievable team, and Shearer was just like at the peak of his powers. So yeah, definitely iconic. And the one thing I love about the Sheffield United game was that we had 8 individual scorers.
Yeah, 8 scorers.
That was just absolute madness. And it just, for me, it was like, we had just been this team who was having like this incredible defensive unit, and we're not conceding goals. But hey, let's just go score 8. And I think we ended up with like 20 individual goal scorers that season, which kind of equaled or beat a record in the Premier League. So
joint with Man United, unfortunately, for amount of goal scorers in a season.
Typical. Story of my life, Alan. Story of my life.
Yes.
Okay. Any others we want to touch on? How about a game that I attended? Another one I attended in St. James's Park, and this was one where I literally lost my voice, and when I came back to go to work, I couldn't talk for like 2 days. Newcastle United 6, Tottenham Hotspur 1. The highlight, never mind the fact that we beat them 6-1, never mind the fact that we were 5-0 up after 22 minutes, but by half time, half of the away fans had left the stadium and gone down those 11,000 stairs to get out of there. I just remember standing there and looking at the scoreboard, the scoreboard up in the top left, up by the away fans. I kept having to check it because I couldn't believe it was happening. That's the only way I can describe it. Absolutely madness. Were you in the bleaker for that one? I don't think you were over it.
We weren't. We hadn't really. We didn't do every single game in the bleaker for that one. I was actually at home. Okay. And I remember Emma, the better half, came in just as the match was kicking off and said something to me. And she's like, I'll be back in 5-10 minutes. I'm just gonna grab something. She came back up and it was 2-0. And she's like, "What the hell's going on?" I was like, "No, I don't know what to say." She walked downstairs to get a drink or something like that. Came back upstairs and it was 4-0. And she's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I'm afraid to do anything. I don't know what's happening."
How long was I gone for? 2 years?
As we were having the conversation, it went 5-0. I was like, "I'm actually going to die today." I was like, "There's something going on. It's going to be all over at the end of this game." You can't explain those first 20 minutes. It was the maddest experience I've ever had as a Newcastle fan. Just, it wasn't. It was exactly what you expect as a Newcastle fan. You're not expecting to go out and do something. That's exactly what we'll do. It's Newcastle. What do you expect?
Do you know, I think, like, in that stadium, it felt like there was 50,000 Newcastle fans who all had the same facial expression that Jacob Murphy had after he scored that belter of a goal. Just like that. It's like, what is this happening? Like, I remember just looking at strangers beside me. We're all just like, I don't know. Is this, what the fuck is going on? Like, you know, you have euphoric moments and you have, you know, crazy celebrations, and then suddenly you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah,
how are we 5-0 up on 22 minutes? Yeah. And you just like, it was a weird game to be at because the whole stadium was just having such a bit of crack and very chilled out because we'd won the game after 20 minutes. Yeah. Like, you just never see that happen, like, especially against a side like Tottenham. Delighted for them, by the way. Yeah. They continue to have stinkers when they play us up in St. James's Park. So long may that continue. And just some great goals as well. Like Alexander Isak got a brace, I think.
He did.
Joe Linton got one as well.
First one. Murphy got two.
Murphy got two, and Wilson came on, didn't he?
And got the one.
Only for Harry Kane to spoil the crack and break the clean sheet. But we get over that. We let them have one at least. Yeah, unbelievable game. I think similarly as well, it's echoes of the 5-1 game against Aston Villa as well, like similar feelings. Geez, I was actually at that game too. I'm just throwing out games that I was at, Alan.
This is actually pretty good now, going that we're about going on Saturday, actually.
Yes, it bodes well, or it's all going to fall apart. Because have we actually been to the same game in St. James's Park, the two of us, yet?
I don't think so, actually.
Oh, no.
We haven't.
Either something special is going to happen, folks, or the worst is going to happen.
Yeah.
And either way, we'll take credit for it. But yeah, that 5-1 against Aston Villa, that opening game, for me, again, the first place my mind goes is Sandro Tonali. 7 minutes?
7
first
minutes
goal for Newcastle on his debut. And all these people that said, he doesn't want to be there and he's not happy and he never smiles. Well, he was fucking smiling after he scored that goal.
Yes.
Hell of a celebration. That was just, again, you're looking at a game where it's the first game of the season, and you know this was a hugely exciting season. It probably didn't go as much to plan as we would have liked, but I walked out of St. James's Park that day. I met Tev, and I was like, "We're going to win the fucking league."
Yeah, we are the best team on planet Earth.
Literally, I was like, "Nobody's stopping us now." No. As we know, that didn't transpire. Yeah. But again, just to do that in an opening game was incredible. Right, we've gone through about 10, maybe 8, 10 games already. 8. Any others that come to mind, Alan, before we start to do a power ranking?
One game that comes to mind that's not actually a Premier League game is when we beat Norwich in the Championship, when Dwight Gale scored a hat-trick when we were 3-1 down and we won 4-3. I think we scored 2 goals in the 90th minute, 92 and 97 maybe. And it was one of them games where I remember watching it sitting there, giving out stink. We're terrible. We're not going back up. I'm now a Championship football fan. This is that. 2 goals in 2 minutes and I'm going, we've already won the league. It's grand. We're going back to the Premier League and then we're going to win the Premier League in 2 years' time. And I was like, just iconic moments as a Newcastle fan. And it was the first time I really understood the Championship, if you know what I mean, where it's going, we have to get out of this. It's terrible. That was just a nice
great
moment
time.
As well.
It wasn't the most fun in the world, but obviously we had quite a strong team in that Championship season. Yeah. And it's hard to think that we were even there. We should never have been there in the first place. It's still hard to believe we were there twice in the last, 10, 15 years, which is just insane. And the less said about that, the better. But yeah, worth a shout. A little bit niche, but I like it. I don't understand anything else. Like, you know, that Chelsea game where Papi Cisse was just scoring bangers for fun comes to mind. Yeah. The Florian Lejeune 2 goals in the last 25 seconds against Everton. Sometimes it's goals that trigger you for games, but we've had a good collection there. And as we said, listeners, let us know in the comments on YouTube if there's any others we haven't mentioned, because Alan was a young man and I'm old, so we don't remember them all. But shout your favourites, particularly from the Premier League year. That's usually what we go with, which is about 92, 93 onwards. And let us know. We'll have a look through in the comments. Now, Alan, we've set ourselves up for either a massive success or a massive failure, because we've basically told everybody listening to this podcast that something big is going to happen this weekend against Man City, and it'll be because of us. Either we'll win or we'll lose. Maybe no draw. But let's do a little preview on this Man City game. I think the big takeaway here, Alan, first of all, is like, I feel like it's probably the biggest game of the season so far, as we said.
Yeah.
But I feel like it feels like this could be our biggest and best chance to get one over on Man City for quite a few seasons. And I say that knowing that Erling Haaland has scored 10 goals in 5 games. Just 5 games, folks. But at the same time, he doesn't have an amazing record scoring against us. I think he scored like 1 in the last 4 starts that he's made. We'll talk about whether or not we think that Fabian Schär and Dan Burn can actually stop him. But would you agree with that? Do you think that like this is our best chance? Are you going into this thinking not so much that we should win, but like if ever there was a day to pull our socks up, pull our shorts up, put in a better performance? You know, we've had 2 back-to-back away games in the league. We're back at home. Are you going into it more confident than perhaps you might have been in previous times?
Confident wouldn't be the word. Optimistic is more what I am. But what I'll say is Manchester City have lost 1 of their last 90 games where Rodri has started. They've lost 4 of their last 13 where Rodri hasn't started. Rodri is not starting.
This is very good news.
If there's ever a pinnacle moment where you're going, this is what we need to do, it's win the midfield battle. They also potentially will not have Kevin De Bruyne, and that man loves tearing St. James's Park up. I've seen the man do it before, unfortunately, in the flesh, banged in a 30-yard volley against the underside of the crossbar. One of the best goals I've ever seen in my whole life, and I was like, I hate that just won the game against us. He loves doing it to us. Might not be playing as well. So this is the real opportunity where we can lay down a marker and get our season finally going. Hate saying that after 6 games or so, but we can finally get into a bit of momentum, push on. But it's looking like it's going to be our big opportunity to finally get a result over Man City.
So here's the question, Alan. You did state very clearly earlier that you're not a Premier League football manager, just in case anyone is wondering. He's not.
Just in case.
If you're Eddie Howe, right, and you've looked at what's transpired over the last few games, the big thing for me, and we touched on it already, is this concept of, do I put out my best 11 players in each position and start with the strongest team I have available? Or am I looking at this as, we've got starters and finishers, I need a strong bench, I may need players to come on to turn things around, I may need players to come on to, add to a lead, or, let's say if we're level, if it's 0-0, whatever. What do you do if you're Eddie Howe in this situation? Because we've said it already. Nobody's really confident that he's all over this. What would you do if you're Eddie Howe?
You play your best side that's playing the best football in training each week, or what you're seeing week in, week out. That's probably what we saw last week, and it just didn't work. Unless Sandro Tonali is not training, he has to start this game of football. I'm going to make a mad suggestion here. I didn't think I wanted to see it, but the more I think about it, I'd play Dan Burn left back. I'd play Kelly centre half.
Wow.
I'd play Trippier right back, and I'd go back to our old style of defending, where we had the 3 centre halves essentially. Trippier can do his roam and do whatever he needs to do, and hopefully get back into a little bit of momentum. That's not me saying I want Dan Burn to start left back every single day. I want Lewis Hall to start 99 times out of 100. I don't really want to see Kelly be used as a left back either. He's a centre half. But Eddie Howe loves his big, strong defenders, and Kelly, Burn, and Schär as a back 3. That's a monstrous defence, and it's strong enough to hold up Haaland, I think. So
they've done it before. That back line have, like, obviously Lloyd Kelly wasn't there, but like we've held off Haaland before on more than one occasion. It is a throwback structurally. It is a throwback to where you'd have Trippier bombing on down the right, and the other 3 just shifting in to account for that, and then obviously you need Trippier to get back. The question is, like I kind of would like Trippier to start. I just think it just brings so much than just football ability and defensive ability. But then you're looking at it. This Jeremy Doku situation, like, this guy just loves to run and run rings, whereas you think Livramento might be better at tracking that. Yeah, like if you were to ask me who would I normally start at left back, I would probably go with Lewis Hall nine
Yeah,
times out of 10. But again, we're conceding goals, we're conceding a lot of shots.
yeah,
Maybe we do need to slightly revert to what used to work, let's call it.
yeah.
But I feel like it's been such a long time since we've seen Dan Burn play left back. It does slightly give me
The
squeaky bum. I'm
heebie-jeebies.
not
Yeah.
gonna
Oh
lie.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll revert back to a moment that I saw last season live. 2 minutes into the game against Luton, Ogbene roasted. I mean, roasted Dan
I
Burn. I
remember
said,
that. Yes, I
I
remember
never
watching it.
want to
Yeah.
see him play left back again. And the more I think about it, this game, I'm going, maybe it's the game to do it, where we will be like. Don't get me wrong, Man City are going to have an awful lot of the ball. They're one of the best teams on planet Earth, so you're just going to have to deal with that. If you have that back three and Trippier to slot in, that's a compact and good defense. It's a good defensively solid back line. And I think that's what we may need. Now, come here. Eddie Howe could throw a curveball and we don't know what he's going to do, but that's what I think he might do. Might.
Interesting. And only Eddie Howe knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And maybe Jason Tyndall as well. None of it matters if we don't do what you said, which is win the midfield battle, right?
Yeah.
And as we said, no Rodri, potentially no De Bruyne.
Yeah.
You're probably looking at Kovacic, potentially somebody like Ilkay Gundogan, who we know is back there, but definitely has aged and maybe not be the exact same player he was. Then you're maybe, I'm trying to think who else, is Foden kind of tucking in as a third midfielder? Is Rico Lewis, who Pep likes to kind of throw into the mix there, who's a good player. Or I don't know, like Matheus Nunes I think is still there, but he barely gets a start. He's probably like this season's Calvin Phillips for them. But again, it's not a terrifying midfield when you start to look at those numbers. But again, it doesn't work unless our midfield works.
We
And
have
it
to
comes
win
back
that
to Bruno
battle.
as the six. I think there's so many, like Fulham literally just glided through that midfield
They
again.
walked. Yeah.
Something needs to change in midfield, like not personnel wise. Like I it's impossible to drop Bruno. We love seeing Joe Linton in there, and then you're looking at between Tonali and Longstaff. I want Tonali all day. I just think he gives us so much quality on the ball that a lot of other players don't have in this team. And when we have had the ball in the last few games, we've done nothing with it. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards Tonali. But on the assumption that Bruno's role needs to slightly change for a game like this, he needs to be a six, not a creative six, not a roaming
sit.
six. A lot of playmaking. Like he'll need to sit for a good portion of this game.
Yeah.
Which means he's probably going to get a yellow card. So listeners, maybe that's a good bet. Gamble sensibly. But I just feel like it won't work if we have these holes in midfield.
No.
And with such an opportunity without Rodri, without De Bruyne, hopefully, it'd be an awful shame if we just didn't do the job in midfield. I don't see Willock starting. I do see Joe Linton starting. And what I want to see is Joe Linton going out and just making shit of people for the entire game and just battering them physically, the aggression. And then, if you have someone like Tonali to be a bit of an outlet, spreading the ball out wide, which takes us to the next big Eddie Howe question, Alan. Are we still Barnes and Gordon? And if so, who's on the left and who's on the right?
Oh, Barnes is on the left. Barnes, that's not a question at the moment. Anthony Gordon's not playing to the levels we thought he was going to come back to. Harvey Barnes is playing to them levels. He's scoring goals, he's getting assists, he's creating chances. The real problem is, do we know if Isak is fit? Because he was not fit last week. That's what I'm very worried about. That we're going to see Gordon playing up top and we're going to see Barnes and Murphy on the wings with Gordon up front. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think Barnes on the left it makes sense because of the goal output, right? Isak is not one goal in 6 games, something like that, 5 games, whereas Barnes is actually, his goal record is showing that he needs to be in his best position because he can score there, right? And we need every opportunity to score. We need to take every chance we get, basically, against Manchester City. The thing I think we spoke about this last week. I spoke about it to whoever would listen to me, to be honest. I sometimes look at Alexander Isak and think that he's better against better teams.
Yes.
And my kind of logic around this is when we've played the likes of, whether it's Wolves or Fulham or Bournemouth, they tend to sit a bit deeper, maybe the low block. And, what Isak wants to do is find space, make runs and find space, channels, get the ball to feet, take guys on. And we've seen him do that against better teams who push up, your Liverpool's, Man City's, Spurs. Ange is known for this, right? Yeah. He wants Van de Ven, Romero, Pedro Porro to be pushing up to the halfway line. And Isak laps that up because he's just got grass to run into. and he's really, really good at like playing the offside trap and all that kind of stuff. That's where I think that if Isak is fit, I think we have an opportunity here, because I think City are that type of team that will also push up, like whether it's a Kanji, Diaz, Stones. These guys do like to roam. They do like to progress up with the field. They'll have a lot of the ball, and that's where these counter attacks, we might just see a different Alex Isak, and I do actually think he will score.
Fingers crossed.
Which is a mad one, because I took him out of my FPL last weekend for Ollie Watkins. But I also thought he wasn't going to start because of that eye injury. So I'd be amazed if he doesn't start. And in fact, if we do play any bit well in terms of, you know, the system working, breaking on the counter, we know we're not going to want loads of the ball. And if we can actually get the quality passes together when we do have the ball on the break, I do actually think we'll see at least one goal from Alexander Isak. So there's my other tip for the weekend, folks. Yeah. It's not that deep or wise. I'm backing a striker to score a goal, but I just feel like that this game will suit him in comparison to, basically, bar the Spurs game where he did score, most of the other games we've played this season. I think this game would suit him better. But again, we won't know until Saturday. We haven't beaten them since 2019. They are in good form overall. They're obviously top of the league. They're only 3 points ahead of us, Alan. But when you look at their last 3 games, so they won their first 4 games. The last 3 games, 2-2 draw with 10-man Arsenal, 2-1 win in the Carabao Cup over Watford, and 0-0 draw against Inter. So they've not really been smashing it in the last 3 games. So as we said, going back to that original question, is this our best chance? I have to say yes. I think this is our best chance of beating Man City.
It is.
In this Eddie Howe, this PIF era. It absolutely is.
Yeah, it is. Let's be honest about it.
So, Alan, put your money where your mouth is. Score prediction.
2-1 to Newcastle.
2-1. I like that.
Yeah.
I was going to go for the same. You know what I'm going to do? I've called this maybe twice this season already, where a lot of goals and it hasn't happened. I'm going to go with like a 3-2. A reverse of last year. So we remember last season they beat us 3-2 in the last minute. I think it was Oscar Bob, who incidentally, Alan, is also out injured, I believe.
Yeah, broken leg.
And won't feature. So, I'm going to go like a 3-2 and say that we just rock St. James's Park and get a well-earned win, and as we said, it'll set us off. I think this is a serious opportunity to beat Manchester City, and we have to absolutely take it.
Have to.
Okay, now Irish Mags business, Alan. First of all, in relation to the Man City game, number one, we have a lot of Irish Mags travelling. You mentioned that early Saturday morning flight. Make sure everybody's donning your Irish Mags gear. Yes. Get involved at the airport. Go talk to everyone. Take as many photos as you can, folks, because we would love to get them onto next week's podcast and up onto the irishmags.com website, where we have all the galleries of all of our Irish Mags on tour and, of course, meetups. So that's the first piece of business. Sticking with Irish Mags on tour as well, Alan. I don't know if we're gonna drop something we're not supposed to say here, Alan, but I'm gonna make an executive decision. Irish Mags members may remember last season we asked you for your Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year for Newcastle United for the season just finished. At that time, it was a very tight vote, but the winners of that vote emerged as Anthony Gordon for Player of the Season and Tino Livramento for Young Player of the Season. And at the time of recording, as it stands now, and we're going to put Tev's head on the block here, Alan.
Yeah.
We believe that on Saturday morning, we, some of the Irish Mags committee, will have the opportunity to present these awards, which are actually awards we've had made, to Anthony Gordon and Tino Livramento. I say at the time of recording because we've been told that it's going to happen.
It's happening.
But anything can happen on the day of a football match. But right now, we hope that our Irish Mags listeners, viewers, members will see a photo of a few of our lovely heads presenting these awards to 2 Newcastle United players in Anthony Gordon and Tino Livramento.
Yes, I can't wait. This will be the second time I've gone over this season to try present these awards, because it was meant to happen at the Sella Cup, and obviously with what went on before the Sella Cup, nothing to do with us, nothing to do with Newcastle United, just with the how would you say, the riots? They weren't riots, they were protests going on. They just, the club requested that. They were like, look, maybe doing an awards presentation before it isn't the best idea. So we're praying to God nothing goes wrong and we can finally get onto the pitch and I present these awards. I am so looking forward to it. I've been telling absolutely anyone who will listen to me Keep an eye out. I have a sneaky suspicion my head is going to be on the official Newcastle Twitter page at some stage this weekend, and I cannot wait because it's going to be my profile picture for the rest of my life.
Right, folks, turn off those notifications on the Newcastle Twitter. Nobody needs to see Alan's big head on the Newcastle Twitter page.
Yeah, can't wait.
We usually see Tev at all these things, so it'll be nice to see a different face.
Yeah.
But yeah, super exciting. Obviously, there's a good gang of us going, and we'd love to bring everyone along if we do. Absolutely. If we do actually get it over the line, but we're a bit limited in what we can do.
Yeah.
But either way, we're going to be Irish Mags on tour. We might get a chance to rock up the stack if it's open for that game. Is that early? If we're lucky. Otherwise,
very early. Yes.
Pubs.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll all be on our best behaviour. But if we do get the result, we all hope we will. It's going to be someday in Newcastle on Saturday for the Irish Mags. Keep your eyes peeled for those Irish Mags merch, kits, flags, the whole lot. I believe we have some new flags on the go, Alan, as well. Eyes emoji.
Shh.
Shh. I've said too much already.
I only collect it tomorrow.
I've said too much already. Okay. Last piece of business for those that aren't travelling. And this is a first, Alan. This is a first for the Irish Mags.
This is a
first.
Not
only do we have one meetup in Dublin this weekend, not only do we have a meetup in Cork this weekend, we also have a meetup in Belfast this weekend. Am I correct? 3 meetups?
Do indeed. We have a triple meetup this week. Okay, so obviously, Bleaker, I personally won't be there. Sean Bowes will be looking after it this week for me, so apologies in advance. Yeah, apologies in advance for that.
Not that guy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what else to say about that. Sorry. Go to the Bleaker, and I apologise in advance. Obviously, Cork, we've had a couple of meetups down there, have always been super successful. Quinlan's bar in Blackpool in Cork, and adding it into the mix, we're doing a bit of a collab with the Northern Irish Toon Army. Not that they're any different to us, but they've essentially just joined our WhatsApp group, so the more the merrier, as we keep saying. They are
welcome aboard
Lavery's Bar in Belfast, which is, I'm sorry, I have to read this because I'm brutal. It's 12 to 18 Bradbury Place, Belfast. B17 1RS is your air, or not your air code, your postcode, shall we say. Yeah. Nice. Anyone in and around any of them areas, please go show up, show your face, get in with the Irish Mags, because all we want is Newcastle fans on the island of Ireland screaming abuse at Manchester City players. That's all we care about. So please join in.
What a week. Like, this is going to be a serious weekend. Just like between Irish Mags travelling, we're going to have photos all over the place, and 3 meetups, Dublin, Cork and Belfast. We're going to have a lot to talk about next week. I'm going to be busy collating photos and trying to get them up on the website. But as we said, listeners, take as many photos as you can. Put them in the WhatsApp groups. Get them over to us. Or you can even just email them over to info@theirishmags.com.
Absolutely.
And keep an eye on that website, theirishmags.com, because we'll be having lots of updates and photographs in the coming week. Oh, I'm buzzing for the weekend already, Alan. I'm not going to lie. I am buzzing. And I just hope the result comes along to match it as well. Right, well, that does bring episode 44 of the Irish Mags show to a close for this week. Thank you to all of the listeners. Thank you, Alan, for turning up, not like Crisho. We hope to see Crisho back at some point. She said no one ever. But in the meantime, as we said, keep an eye on our socials, all in the links below, for all the updates on the Irish Mags. And, of course, information on the meetups. There'll be more meetups to come. We're talking about Limerick. We're talking about Galway. We're talking about Mayo. The Irish Mags are taking over. So, until next week, we'll say the usual, Alan. Away the lads, slán, go fóil, and see you all very soon.
Slán a bhaile.